To get started. Does everybody have a pen and a workbook? Yes, awesome. All right. So first, I just want to say thank you everybody for coming out. My name is Grisha. I'm the founder of Do It Different. Do It Different is a resource for mental health and self-care, and our main objective is to teach you how to use technology as a tool for transformation. That involves laptops, cell phones, even social media. So, to get started, we're going to talk a little bit about what our objectives are going to be. We had a projector malfunction, so we're going to be using this little screen here, my voice, and this board here. So, our first objective is going to be to increase mindfulness. Mindfulness is something that we're going to talk a lot about in this seminar, and it's something we're going to touch upon a little bit later. We're also going to learn to use technology as a tool for transformation. And transformation is really subjective. It means whatever you would like it to mean. In essence, do it different means that if something is not working, you do it differently and you try an alternative route or an alternative path. Then we're going to want to destigmatize mental health. So mental health in general always has a lot of stigma behind it. And with that stigma comes people internalizing that stigma, and it becomes their mental health and self-care journey. And lastly, we're going to want to increase the necessary dialogue, both with ourselves and with each other. The dialogue that we have with ourselves is going to be our internal dialogue, and the dialogue we have with each other is going to be discussing mental health, breaking down that stigma, and being vulnerable with each other and building bonds and relationships through that vulnerability. And so first, we are going to turn to the first page in the activity workbook. And this first activity is a self-audit. Now, all these questions you want to answer as truthfully and as honestly as possible. One of the biggest topics that we're going to talk about here today is what you do not bring to light keeps you in the dark. So anything that you are not honest with yourself about right now, anything you choose not to bring to the light, will eventually keep you in the dark. So try to be as honest with yourself as possible with how you answer these questions, and we're going to regroup in about 5 minutes. So how do you guys feel after answering those questions? If anybody just wants to blurt out or let us know how they feel.
Mixed feelings.
Yeah, mixed feelings? Fair enough. And those are good. So it's okay, and it's actually encouraged to have mixed feelings because that means that you are honest with yourself about something that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So when we talk about mental health, how do you guys define mental health? What would be what you would choose to define mental health as? And this can be all-encompassing or just a single factor of it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write it on the board right here. And there are no wrong answers in this.
State of mind.
State of mind. Very good. Anybody else? You can just blurt it out. What was it?
Balance. Awareness.
Anybody else?
Disclosure.
Disclosure. Very good. If I can have somebody, preferably in the front row, read this out for me. You can't see it? All right, I'll read it out for you. So, mental health by definition is a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. But we all know that it's actually a lot more. Mental health is a spectrum. And what I mean by that is physical health is also a spectrum. So if someone were to break their leg, you wouldn't call them an unhealthy person. They simply broke their leg. The same way, if someone is feeling depressed, that doesn't mean that they're mentally unhealthy or have a mental illness. It means that they're falling on the scale of feeling depressed. So it's a really, really large spectrum. You also, forgot to mention, you have a notes page towards the back of your pamphlet if that's something that you want to do. And that ties into what I was saying, that mental health is not mental illness. So with this spectrum, it allows us a large variety of what mental health is. So just because you might feel depressed does not mean that you are in depression. They're two very, very different things. They're two very different things, and they are dealt with very, very differently. And last but not least, mental health is important. And the reason that mental health is important is because it knows no bounds. Mental health is not concerned about how many followers you have, or what's in your bank account, or how many friends you have. It affects everybody. And oftentimes, sometimes, it affects those who have a surplus of things. because they feel as though they are being ungrateful for it or they have not deserved it. And you can look at cases such as Robin Williams or other celebrities that commit suicide, and they are people that, if you looked at their life, they're always smiling. You would assume that they had everything that anybody could ask for, and yet they still found some way, or mental health still found some way to have them struggle throughout their life. And just to point out some of those staggering statistics, 50% of all lifetime cases of mental illness are developed by age 14. And that number jumps to 75% of all cases of mental illness being developed by age 24. And these are staggering statistics. That means by the time that you're 14 nowadays, you have 50% of a chance to develop a mental health disorder. And that leads to facts like this. 1 in 5 youth has a mental disorder in any given year, which causes suicide to be the second leading cause of death in people 10 to 24 years old. Suicide is the second leading cause of death between 10 and 24. And that's because 8 to 10 years is the average onset between onset and intervention. And what that means, if you fall in that 50% category of people who begin to develop a mental disorder by the age of 14, it can be 10 years until you seek help or intervention. And within those 10 years, the mental illness or the mental illness can run its course. So, and lastly, mental health disorder is diagnosable and manageable. So while many mental health disorders cannot be cured, there's always hope for both diagnoses and having a manageable case of mental illness or a mental health disorder. So what do we do about this? So thankfully now our society has sort of begun to be more aware of mental health and its effects on our society in general. Before, there was always this idea that if you went to therapy, you had to be crazy. And that idea still rings true. I am Russian Azerbaijani by descent. In Eastern Europe, if you go to therapy, you're considered crazy, let alone relationship therapy or any other kind of therapy. And just recently now, they've started to develop new forms of therapy for positive psychology. And what that means is it's people that aren't necessarily quote unquote crazy or have mental illness or mental disorder. It's simply using positive psychology to teach them how to deal with the eventual problems that they may run into in life. Because those same tactics that would help a depressed person, that would help a person in depression, can help a depressed person when they have those same feelings. And we need to work on integrating mental health into everything we do. And this is a 3-step process of education, integration, and application. So education would be exactly this: creating resources for people to be able to educate themselves and educate others on the importance of mental health and learning what self-care and living a wellness-focused lifestyle is about. Integration would be integrating those resources and having seminars just like this at places like HolyRad, a space for inclusivity, multimedia studios of freelancers, people who need these resources, and make sure that we can get that education to where it needs to go. And application, which is arguably the most important step of this process, if you are given the education and that education is integrated, it means nothing if you don't apply it to your life. If you don't apply what it is that you learn and it goes in one ear and out the other, it's a very, very, very bad thing, because at the end of the day, the application is what's going to give you those results that you're looking for. So let's see what that looks like for the Department of Education, for example. So this is social emotional learning. This is the Department of Education's answer, essentially, to the mental health crisis. This is the Department of Education's answer to the mental health crisis. And by answer, I mean that this is the education resource that they created. I'll read it out for you just because it's hard to read. It's whole person wellness contains emotional, social, intellectual, spiritual, occupational, and physical. those are all things that you need to consider and ensure that you are having a whole person wellness mentality. That means that you are actively pursuing being the best version of yourself in all of these circumstances. And it's important to note that I don't say you have to be perfect in all of these. The important thing is that you pursue it and that you put yourself on this journey, on this path to whole person wellness. So after they create the education comes the integration. So we're really fortunate that we live in New York State, because New York State just became one of the first states to mandate mental health education on the same level as physical health. I wish they would have come out with that when I was in school, but better late than never. So this essentially means that now mental health is taught on the same plane as physical health. And this speaks for a larger shift in the societal ideal of what mental health means. And it goes back to that positive psychology where you don't need to be struggling with your mental health to have to learn about it or to want to learn about it. And finally, the application. This is a really long quote that I'm not going to read, so I'll sum it up for you. It is essentially a nurse from a school saying that after they implemented this social emotional learning into their curriculum, she had noticed less visits to the nurse's office for stomach aches, headaches, anxiety, and just general wellness visits because they wanted to escape the classroom. And that speaks volumes. For kids to be able to meditate for even 15 minutes a day and reduce wellness visits to the nurse, or reduce physical symptoms like stomach aches or headaches of anxiety or depression or sadness. That shows that it works. And it allows the children to cultivate mindfulness. So there's that word that we talked about again, mindfulness. Does anybody have any guesses or want to say what mindfulness means to them? Yeah?
Like the ways in which you take steps for yourself to gain spirituality.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Like being aware of your faults and like of what you can do better.
Very good. Anyone else?
Being present.
Being present. Yeah, no, you can also blurt them out. You don't have to raise your hand. I hated school and raising my hand. But yeah, absolutely. So those are all really, really correct. And mindfulness, by definition, is a mental state that is achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations used as a therapeutic technique. How many of you would call yourselves mindful? Right? It's okay, that's good. How many of you would consider yourselves an overthinker? Yeah, there you go. So how many of you would say that being mindful and overthinking is the same thing?
I mean, I'm sure they go pretty.
They go pretty close, right? But yeah, you would? Great. So, being an overthinker, like I am, I never understood, well, what's the difference between being mindful and overthinking? If being mindful is just thinking about things and I'm always thinking, then I'm mindful, right? Well, that's not true. And it was really this that changed my life. Mindful versus mindful. And what true mindfulness is having control, not over the thoughts that enter your head, simply what you do with them. That is the true definition of what mindfulness is and the separation from overthinking. So you may be overthinking and you may be constantly thinking, but what comes with mindfulness is understanding that you can take action against those thoughts. Right, Ellie? And you can do and take steps to alleviate the anxieties that pop up into your mind that you would consider while you were overthinking. Yep, it is all of that. And so when you become mindful of the actions, something really, really special happens. You begin to figure out who you are as an individual. And identity is something that has become, in my opinion, on the forefront of our generation. We're losing our identities. We struggle to find them through social media, through the social circles that we're in, through the friendships that we make. we begin to become a reflection of everything around us rather than becoming who we truly are, because we are stuck in a mindful setting rather than being mindful. And I just want to remind you, and being mindful allows you something really special. It allows you to live your life with intention. And I like to think that all human beings are on the same level. We're all the same on the inside. And the one thing that separates us is intention. The one thing that separates us is the people who live with intention and the people who allow life to live them. When you live your life with intention, it means that your input determines your outlook, your output determines your output, and your output determines your future. And what that means is when you are mindful over your decisions, over your thoughts, over what you choose to interact or not interact with, you begin to live your life intentionally. And even when you are struggling, you can find solace in the fact that you are at least living your life and your intention brought you to that struggle. And your intention is what's going to get you out of it. So how many of you have heard the quote that, oh, you think you're the center of the world, or you think the world revolves around you? A lot of people, right? And that's because self-care is really a form of benevolent selfishness, right? We are required to be selfish with our time, with our emotions, not to a point where it infringes upon other people's ideals of us, but we as individuals like to believe that we know what's best for us. We like to believe that, but we might not find out that it's true later on in the seminar. But a really awesome fact, and something that kind of grounds me, is that by our understanding of the physical universe that we live in, it's ever expanding in all directions constantly. And what that means, as being made from the same basic building blocks of the universe, and being the one that is consciously experiencing that reality, the universe is always ever expanding from you in all directions, making you the center of your own universe. And that's something that just fills me with comfort when I feel bad about saying no to plans. So I keep saying you, but who are you? You know, who is the self? What is identity? What does it consist of? I know we would like to think that we are not our possessions. We are not who we hang out with, or what we buy, or what we surround ourselves with. So who are we? And the reason I have this quote up is because the world becomes a better place when you figure out who you are. You stop putting yourself in positions that make yourself feel uncomfortable, because you begin to understand what those conditions are. You begin to understand who you are as an individual, and what a lot of people look at as alignment is really just further discovering who they are and being prepared to walk through the door when opportunity opens. So, here are a couple basic building blocks. I'm going to stand on this side just so you can see. So, who you are, partially, is what in this world makes you feel good or bad. And I don't mean in the sense of physically, I mean mentally. If something does not feel right to you, if something feels forced, if something feels like you're beating a dead horse or you want to move on, it's a very clear sign that it's not for you. If something feels good, on the other hand, if you get filled with fulfillment when you do it, if it reminds you of your purpose in life, then that is part of who you are as well. Next, your negative and positive habits. This is probably the biggest thing that defines part of your identity. And I'm going to talk a lot more about habits and what they are and why they are such a large part of our identity a little bit more later. Next, we have your internal dialogue. So we talked about this as one of the objectives that we wanted to sort of touch upon. And the reason that your internal dialogue is so important is because who you think you are is how you will act. Who you believe yourself to be and what you believe yourself to be capable of are the limitations that you put on yourself. If you don't believe that you can release music, you will never release music. If you don't believe that you can start a startup, you will never start a startup. And if you don't believe that you can't stand in front of a bunch of people with very little public speaking experience and give a seminar on mental health, you will never do that. But it's all a process, and that's okay. And the reason that the internal dialogue is so important is because the words that we use to describe ourselves internally become the words that we choose to describe ourselves externally. When someone knocks into something and they say, oh, I'm so clumsy, or oh, I'm such a klutz, it becomes 10 times more difficult to not be a klutz because you have now associated that action with your identity. It becomes part of who you are. And this remains true for anything in life, really. For pain, for happiness. Some people can be so tied to pain that to come out of a relationship that is bad or toxic means losing a part of who they are as a person, because that relationship has now become a part of their identity. And I'll give you a really, really good example of this, and it's called the reticular activity system. And the reticular activity system is a part of the brain that acts as a filter. So what a lot of people see when they hear a new word, you know how you hear that word and you start hearing it over and over and over and over again? Or if you're in a crowd of people and all these people are talking, you can somehow always pick out your name if you hear it being called. That's because of the reticular activity system. That's because your brain's filter is always working to make sure that it doesn't miss the things that are important. So what you choose to define as important goes hand in hand with your internal dialogue. If you choose to stress more about your anxieties, and if you choose to be more concerned with the negative aspects of life, that is what you have trained your reticular activity system to feed through. So that same aspect of people saying that positivity breeds positivity and negativity breeds negativity, that's the scientific reasoning why. People feel positivity because their reticular activity system has been fine-tuned to look out for it, to recognize it, to understand its authenticity. And finally, we have what actions fill you with fulfillment. And I say fulfillment for a very, very important reason, and not happiness. So a lot of people in life, when you ask them, oh, what are their goals? Or, oh, are you happy? And here's why you don't want to make happiness your goal in life. Because happiness is a destination. Happiness is a purchase. Happiness is the next car you buy. Happiness is closing out a round of investing. Happiness is always a goal and a destination and the next and the next and the next thing that will make you happy. And you will be forever chasing it. And it may seem like a really, really great thing, and it may be something that fills you with drive and passion towards your life. But what happens when one day you have all this stuff and you still feel empty? And that goes to our same thing that we talked about earlier on, where you have all these people who have what you may want in life and still manage a way to find sadness. And that's because they define their life by their ability to be happy. And the Greeks, in my opinion, had it very, very right. The eudaimonia is a word used by Greek philosophers to define life fulfillment, human flourishing, or prosperity. And the reason that this is so important and a better replacement for happiness is because this is about the journey. This is about having patience with the progress that you're making in life. You can have negative emotions without labeling your entire existence as miserable. If happiness is constantly your goal in life and you feel sad, well, you failed your life goal. You're not happy, you're sad, and now you failed. But if eudaimonia is your goal, if fulfillment and prosperity is your goal, you can't fail. Because even the failures are teachable lessons and moments where you can decide to learn and do things differently. And resilience, absolutely. Oh, also, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, I don't want to be just talking at you for an hour, please feel free to interrupt me. All right. And so when we run into seeking fulfillment and we inevitably run into those negative emotions, what do? That's why it's important to have resources like this, to educate yourself and to know yourself. So when you are in a rut or when you feel negative emotions, you have some next steps you can take. And this is an incredible next step. Gratitude. Gratitude is something that you probably hear a lot of entrepreneurs on Instagram talking to you about. You probably hear a lot of people telling you how important it is to remain grateful. But what is gratitude really? Gratitude in its essence is a reminder of the things that we have jaded ourselves to. The things that we take for granted on a day-to-day basis because of the fact that we don't give them a second thought. They have become a part of us. I promise you that if tomorrow you break your leg, you will be grateful for the ability to walk immediately. And you will spend the next 6 months being grateful and waiting for the day that you can walk on 2 legs again. So why is it that we wait for us to break a leg to feel grateful for our legs? Why is it that we wait for us to be sick to be thankful for to be thankful for health? Why is it that it takes losing someone for us to appreciate them ever being there? That's because we don't practice gratitude enough in our day-to-day life. It's because we wake up jaded to all the things that surround us, let alone in New York City, one of, if not the most metropolized place in the world where anything is just a tap away on your phone or a phone call or an Instagram. And we don't realize that in all these other countries and in all these other places, people still struggle to even find water. Can you imagine all of your struggles and you go to somebody that has to walk miles to get a glass of water and you go complain to them? Can you imagine how foolish your problems would feel? And that puts things into perspective for us. Are our problems ever really as big as we believe them to be? And we'll talk about that a little bit more later because that's something called negativity bias. And we're going to talk about that in a bit. Oh, forgot one more thing, sorry. And the last thing is, I touched upon appreciating someone while we're here or while they are alive. And the reason that this is so important and the reason why remembering that you will die is such a great exercise is because you feel rushed. You feel all of a sudden this impending doom. And bringing it back to intentional versus non-intentional, what you define yourself as and what you choose to do with that feeling of impending doom is what is going to define you being successful or you failing in your self-care journey. So, we're going to take a little bit of time. We're going to flip over to the next page in our activity workbook. And we're just going to take a little bit of time to write down some things that we're grateful for. It could be anything, really. There's nothing cliche, there's nothing foolish that you can write about. Like I was talking about, you can even feel thankful for your legs. You can feel thankful for the fact that you're in a room with heating right now. You can feel thankful for anything that you have been taking for granted. Does anybody want to share what they feel grateful for today? Go ahead, bro.
I feel like that everything that told me, helped me, and made me better.
There you go, even the bad stuff, right? There you go. Anybody else? Yeah, what's up, Lee?
Here's a good one. 23-year-old me.
23-year-old you, guys.
For making the change to develop my mind further and my purpose and
Very
what I
nice.
want in life.
Very nice. And it always feels better in hindsight than that going through the actual process, right?
Yeah, well, to look back and he's like it was a lot scarier than it is
absolutely.
now. So like to start something is a lot scarier. So I thank that guy.
For starting, yeah, absolutely. Jess?
I kind of said the same thing. I said my mindset today, like who I was last year is completely different than who I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Life passions.
Life passions.
Yeah.
What are they?
Photography.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. Yeah, having a passion is a really incredible thing, and it's actually something that we're going to talk a little bit more about. So it's awesome you mentioned it. Anybody else?
I spilled the chicken katsu I just ate.
Chicken katsu. Very nice, very nice. I'm grateful for food always. I don't know how I'm not overweight. So I wrote all of you for coming, my good health, my ability to hear, and New York City, because it's just such a great place. There's really no place like it. And Every day I wake up and, I run and I get my bacon, egg, and cheese, but I don't stop to think that, so many people, over 5 million people, become tourists just for our city. And we live here on a day-to-day basis. Rent sucks though. So how many of you guys found it hard to be grateful for something? Or how many of you found yourselves struggling with coming up for things that you're grateful for? Nobody, right? Little hard, right? When you decide to be grateful for something, you might feel an air of foolishness for not being grateful for it previously, for spending all that time taking it for granted. And just in general, it's very difficult for us as human beings to be honest with ourselves and to be genuinely have radical candor with ourselves. And there's a reason for that. The first major one is cognitive biases get in the way. If you cheated and looked at your pamphlet, you'll see that you have a little bit of information there. Laura, don't cheat now. We'll get there in a second. But we're going to focus on this because this is something that is also something that changed my life. It can be scary. Being honest with yourself is a very difficult thing to do. When you are honest with yourself, it forces you to confront yourself. It creates negative emotions, and it adds a hurdle for yourself in life. It adds something for you that you have to climb now. A hill to get over, a mountain to climb, however you want to look at it. The essence of do it different is recognizing things within yourself and then taking action. But it's hard to take action sometimes. Sometimes I wake up and all I want to do is lay in bed. And there's nothing wrong with that, if that's what I need for myself, that's what I'm going to do, And so when we talk about cognitive biases are essentially the way that our mind lies to us. So these 4 cognitive biases are probably the biggest ones that affect us. I know there's certainly something that I struggle with. The first one is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is believing in something because it is already confirming your pre-existing belief. If I was to tell you that this is a great mental health class, you believe me, right? I would hope you believe me, right? Because it's already confirming something that you would hopefully already believe. If somebody tells you that you breathe oxygen outside, you'll believe them because you already believe that yourself and it's only confirming what you already knew. Next, we have a really big one, the negativity bias. So why is it that in any circumstance, the negative always outweighs the positive? Why is it so hard for us to focus on the positive?
Because of how we react.
Because of
How we react.
Because of how we react.
Because pain feels much more real than anything else.
Interesting.
It happens maybe less times, so like maybe your synapses or something
Yeah.
fire off differently.
Exactly. So that is actually very close to what happens. So with the negativity bias, what ends up happening is your brain holds more weight to things that are negative.
Wow.
That's just purely how we are. Think about it in this sense, right? Imagine you have a partner, you're in a relationship, and they have 95% of what you're looking for in a partner, but they have 5% missing. Well, they actually will do this. 80% of what you're looking for, and they have 20% missing, right? How much you want to bet that 80 goes out the window, and all you focus on is the 20%? All you focus on is the 5% that your ex may have had, or all you focus on is the 5% that you wish they had. And that's why cheating hurts so much. And that is the key to relationships. Even if your partner does not have everything you're looking for, it's being grateful for that 80% that they have. And the reason that cheating hurts so much, even if it's for an infinitesimally small moment, even if you're intoxicated, it's because your partner valued somebody else's 20% over your 80. And that's, oh yeah, right, that's the shit. And that's what makes it so hurtful. And that's what makes it so hurtful. Because at the end of the day, we want to believe that we are stronger mentally than we really are. We want to believe that the negativity bias does not affect us. We may feel that we are immune to the negativity bias. Yeah, what's up?
Do you think it has anything to do with how obsessed we are to work on ourselves?
Absolutely. I just heard a quote today actually that says perfection is the key to procrastinating progress. So if you chase perfection and you constantly are seeking for the right moment or the right time or this or that, you will procrastinate inevitably. And that is because we hold ourselves to such a high standard, and society holds ourselves to such a high standard. Instagram has become a highlight reel of everybody's top moments. So who are you to compare you on your worst day to everybody else's best day on social media? How could you possibly measure yourself up to anybody else if all you see is everybody's best and not their worst? What you see right now is me standing on this stage giving you all a talk. What you don't see is the countless hours of struggle that I put in, trying to muster the strength to do public speaking, trying to trick myself out of thinking that I wasn't right to do this, or that I didn't know what I was talking about. But the truth is that it doesn't fucking matter. I'm never gonna be ready. I'm never gonna get to the point where I want to get. And that's why I have to just start and I have to keep going. And even if I mess up, every time that I mess up now, it doesn't bother me. Because every time I mess up now is a lesson that I've learned to be better in the future. And that connects back to eudaimonia and fulfillment. Because if I held myself to such a high standard, every single every single every single trip up would destroy me. I'd go home and I'd cry. I'm emotional, I cry. It happens. But I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, see, but I'm not gonna do that. Because even if I messed up, I'm so happy to be here in the first place. I'm so happy to be doing this and seeing all of you, friends, people I don't even know. That's awesome. That's so cool. Okay, next, we have one of my favorites, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. So the Dunning-Kruger Effect is essentially a psychological phenomenon where people do not accurately measure their cognitive ability. More summed up as stupid people think they're smart and smart people think they're stupid. Basically. And that's because smart people know how much they don't know. You've never met a person who's the smartest person in a room who constantly feels the need to prove it. They don't need to prove it. Who are you to prove? They don't care. That's because they know that in their own mind, they're stupid. There's so much more that they can learn. They understand that knowledge is a never-ending process. Whereas stupid people think they know everything. They think they have it all figured out and they have nothing left to learn. And when you feel like you have nothing left to learn, then you've never really learned anything in the first place. Okay? Next, we have selective perception. Is the tendency not to notice or more quickly forget stimuli that cause emotional discomfort and contradict our prior beliefs.
That one didn't make it.
Yeah, it's not in there. So, how many of you smoke? Yeah, right? How many of you smoke when you feel sad? How many of you smoke to feel better? There you go.
How about all the time?
Yeah, right. How about all the time for no reason, right? And the reason that we end up doing that and the reason that we look towards those things is because marijuana, at the end of the day, helps us numb. It helps us either feel something else, feel something less, or feel something more that we want to feel. And it's great when you have control over that emotion, but it's very detrimental when you don't. Because you get stuck in this loop of going, feeling sad, smoking, not taking action, and then feeling sad again. And that's why it goes back to being honest with yourself. Being honest with who you are as an individual and your ability to still make progress despite the roadblocks that are in your way, even if you are the one that placed them there. So we're just going to take a little bit of time now. We're going to turn the page. And you guys can take, oh, never mind. Well, yeah, you can turn the page. But I forgot, I added a slide in last minute. So cognitive dissonance. So basically what I was talking about right now is a cognitive dissonance. A cognitive dissonance is the ways that we know something is right or isn't right for us, and yet we still choose not to do it. because we rationalize, because we make excuses, because we just decide that in this moment, this one infinitesimally small moment, the choices that we make will not matter in the long run. There's always tomorrow to make that choice. There's always tomorrow to be better. But then tomorrow becomes today, and tomorrow becomes tomorrow. And you're left in a never-ending cycle of constantly chasing, wanting to be better, but not taking the action to do it. And that's a cognitive dissonance. And the reason that it happens is because one of the cognitive biases on your page there. So if you look through that list, I don't know if you already looked at it, but there's a long list of cognitive biases. You'll all be able to keep these worksheets afterwards, so don't worry about reading all of them. I just wanted you guys to have access to these because I want you to know the ways that your mind plays tricks and lies to you. I want you guys to be aware of how many resources there are out there that you can use to better yourself. Imagine how much more powerful or how much easier it might be to make a decision if you know why you're doing it. We'll talk about that also later. So, it's motivational quote o'clock. I'm going to write these on the board. Okay, I'm only going to write one of them down just because it's my favorite one. So this is a quote by Marcus Aurelius. And Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor. And he is essentially someone that wrote one of the most famous books of all time. It's called Meditations. And Meditations was essentially a journal for himself. He never planned to release it. And it was only found years and years and years later and published. And it's still to this day is one of the most highly revered books. And this quote says, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." So that means that the impediment to action advances action. So that which stands in your way, that hill, that mountain that you have to climb, that you have now shown yourself because you have been honest with yourself, is what becomes your path. You can choose to go around it, but that mountain will always come back. It will always be something that you have to climb. Because once you have brought it to light, it always feels bad to allow it to keep yourself in the darkness. And that's the importance of being honest with yourself. Next, we have smooth seas never made for a skilled sailor. How good would you get at life if you were always happy? How good would you get at dealing with things if you were always sad? There's a term that goes around these days called helicopter parent. You guys have heard of that term, helicopter parent, right? So a helicopter parent, and now there's a new one called snowplow parent, right, is essentially a parent that hovers over their kid. It's a parent that sets up life for them, make sure they have everything they could ever need, the road is clear, and they can just get into the college they want, do whatever it is they want to do, pay for everything. And you find that oftentimes the people who are in those situations the most are the ones who struggle the most. And that's because they did not learn the mechanisms or tools they needed to deal with the eventuality of disaster. Because disaster will come, struggle will come, pain will come, heartbreak will come. There's no way to avoid it. You can live your entire life trying to avoid pain, and it'll still find you. So the way that we deal with pain is extremely, extremely important. And the last quote is going to be, "Difficult paths lead to beautiful destinations." So you can sort of see a little bit of a theme that we have going on here, which is that being sad sucks, but it's also the best thing that can happen to you. It is the best thing that can happen to you. And I know that seems really, really weird to say that sadness and pain and heartbreak are great, you know? And I'm not saying that you should thrust yourself into these situations and get involved with an emotionally unavailable person. I just mean that if it happens to you, it's not the worst thing in the world. Because the next time someone comes around and is emotionally unavailable, you'll say, fuck you. I've had that, thank you. I'm good. I'm good. And that is the lesson. That is the lesson. That no matter how much pain and struggle you go through, you have survived 100% of your worst days. And that has equipped you to survive 100% of the days that are going to be even worse than those. So we mentioned about why pain is important. And we talk about this for multiple reasons. How many of you wish you felt no pain? That'd be pretty cool, right? Yeah. There is actually something that exists like that, and it's called CIPA, congenital insensitivity to pain. These are people that feel no pain. Anybody been to a freak show? Ever stapled a dollar bill onto somebody? That is something that they do at a freak show. Those are people who have CIPA, which is a congenital insensitivity to pain. And it sounds awesome. In fact, it sounds like a superpower. It sounds like the coolest thing in the world until you get sick. Until you break a bone and you don't know. Until your liver shuts down and your body shows no sign. Until you're septic and already close to death. So you may feel like you don't want to feel pain. You may feel like you don't want to run into heartbreak. But you need to run into heartbreak to find love. You need to know sadness to know happiness. And you need to know pain to know comfort. Think of pain as a human check engine sign. How many of you here drive? Yeah? How many of you check your engine as soon as it says check engine? Yeah? Yeah, there we go. Pretty good. Good car owners. So as soon as a check engine light goes on, you should go get it checked out. And the same thing goes for pain. As soon as you feel pain, you should process it in a healthy fashion. How do you process pain in a healthy way? You take action against your anxiety. That is the best antidote. Taking action against your anxiety. And the reason that this is important is because would you ignore physical pain? Nick, you break your leg. What's the first thing we're doing right now?
We going to the hospital.
We going to the hospital, right? That's the first thing you do. You put it in a cast, you wrap it up, you rest, you baby yourself, you make everybody else baby you so you can feel good. And that's that. 6 months later, you're good. Your leg's okay. So what? Yeah.
Did I say that I'm probably one of the people that just brush it off? And be like, no.
Absolutely. Yeah. You definitely could until your leg looks like this in 3 months, you know. And that's one of the things, you know, is that it's great in the moment to be like, oh, okay, it's good, you know. But then 7 months later, when you're struggling, it doesn't always feel that good,
No.
right? So why is it that when we break our leg or something physical happens to us, the first thing we do is we seek help? But when a loved one dies, or someone breaks up with us, or we lose a friend, or any other mental health struggle or anxiety that we face, we don't hold it to the same regard. Even when it's been proven that mental strain can have the same physical debilitating effects as physical trauma can. Meaning that if you suffer through depression, your body can feel as tired as it would if you were in a car crash. If you sustained severe trauma. And it feels pretty silly to be bad on yourself about not being able to get out of bed. All of a sudden. You wouldn't blame someone with a broken leg for struggling to get out of bed. Probably being on a bowl of ice cream. So, how do we deal with pain? Anybody? Huh? Sleep? That's a good one.
I ate through it.
You eat through it? That's good. Anybody else?
Listen to music.
Listen to music. I smoke. Anyone else?
Journal.
Journal. There you go. That's a great one. Draw.
Travel.
Travel. Very good. So walking. Yeah, I also take walks. They're very good.
Express yourself.
Express yourself. So I'm glad that I'm hearing a lot of positive coping mechanisms. That makes me so happy. Yeah, exactly. Some people say alcohol. Some people say drugs. Some people say sex. Some people say anything, really. Whatever it is that makes you feel better in the moment, right?
Some of us use our pets.
Some of us use our pets. But here's the problem. here's where our coping mechanisms begin to turn on us. When you use certain coping mechanisms, for example, psychoactive drugs or alcohol or sex that doesn't really mean anything to you. There's nothing wrong with sex or having sex without labels. It's only when it becomes self-deprecating and something that is affecting you in a negative sense that it becomes bad. And that's the same thing with drugs and alcohol. Smoking weed is okay, drinking is okay, but it begins to become a problem when every time you struggle, the first thing you do is grab a bottle or go find someone to have sex with. Because then you refuse to confront what it is that is actually causing that pain. You cope with it in a negative fashion that leads you to ignore the source of the problem. It's like putting a Band-Aid on an infected wound. You may have covered it up, but in 2 weeks it'll be infected, even worse. And all of a sudden your Band-Aid doesn't work anymore. And now you need to amputate. Just lost a leg. And that sucks. So when we talk about negative and positive coping mechanisms, negative coping mechanisms create a cycle of self-deprecation. It makes it harder to form positive coping mechanisms. Because I'll be honest with you, negative coping mechanisms are fun. They're a lot of fun. People party, people drink, people do drugs. And in the moment, you get all the instant gratification that you were looking for. You were happy for the moment. But then you come home, or the next day comes, and so does the hangover, and so does the sadness, and so does the negative emotions, and you realize that they never really went anywhere. And so now it's time to go find your next fix. Now it's time to go partake in your negative coping mechanism once again. And the thing about coping mechanisms is that they can have long-lasting effects on your life. They're easier to abuse. They never deal with the actual issue at hand, and it's all about instant gratification. And that's where it becomes dangerous. When all you do is seek instant gratification, you do not learn what it is to truly work for something. I like to say that the things in life that are worth it don't come easy. And the things that come easy never really feel worth it, you know? We might all feel like we want to win the lottery, but if you look at statistics, almost everybody that wins the lottery ends up either dead, broke, or in jail. And that's just a fact. And that's because winning $10 million doesn't give you a $10 million mindset. Winning $10 million doesn't tell you how to deal with that money. Doesn't tell you how to up your coping mechanisms to 10. It doesn't. You just have $10 million and all your instant gratification and all your negative coping mechanisms. And an unlimited supply of money to spend on those. So, positive coping mechanisms, on the other hand, all you really need is one. If you have one positive coping mechanism, one passion, one thing that you can go to, whether it be journaling or painting or traveling or art or photography, anything that you can find that will give you that sense of relief from your anxiety is all you need. Whereas with negative coping mechanisms, you may need 5 of them because the first one just doesn't hit the same. You discover new passions. You find healthy communities in these positive coping mechanisms. Because just like this, we are all from different parts of Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island, wherever you hail from. But one thing brought you to this room today. Whether it's supporting me or seeking mental health knowledge. And that's the thing. Each and every one of you has participated in a positive coping mechanism today. Each and every one of you will be able to leave today with the knowledge and the resources that you need to become a better individual. And that's the real goal of Do It Different, is offering you a complete solution. I don't want to give you shallow self-help advice. I don't want to tell you, oh, go journal and you'll be good. I don't want to tell you drink flat tummy tea and your body dysmorphia will be better, because it's not. I don't want to give you shallow help self-advice. I want to follow through with you. I want each and every one of you to feel leaving today that you now have the resources required to better yourself and to chase a whole wellness mindset. So, how do we break our negative coping mechanisms? And how do we form positive ones? So, the biggest thing that you can do today, and one of the biggest activities that we're going to do today, is find your why. When you find your why, you can endure anyhow. I'm going to say that one more time. When you find your why, you can endure anyhow. When you figure out why it is that you're doing the things you're doing, when you figure out why it is that you really came here today, and I can answer that for you, it's because you recognize where you are as an individual. It's because you understand that you want to be somewhere better. And I don't say be someone better. I say be somewhere better. Because you already are the better person that you want to be. You just need to start acting like it. And that's the truth of it. You already know what it is that you need to do. Next, you want to build a support system. When you build a support system, I don't mean that you want to recruit a bunch of 5 strangers on the street to yell at you every time you pick up a bottle of alcohol. I mean, you want to tell the people that you actively participate in negative coping mechanisms with. You want to tell them that I'm no longer trying to participate in this. And the truth of it is a lot of us are scared of it because we fear losing friends. We fear losing connections that are based on these negative coping mechanisms. I went to City As, a school downtown, school for delinquents. If you failed school or school failed you, you went to City As. I had a lot of friends. After having no friends my entire high school career, I suddenly came to a school where I felt like I belonged. I came to a school where I felt like everybody sort of understood. And it wasn't until a year and a half later, and about copious amounts of marijuana smoking later, that I realized I might want to stop or slow down smoking. And it took me 4 months to actually do it. And when I reflected on why, it became clear to me. Because I lost every single one of my friends that I made in that school. I became alone. Because all of those friendships were based in negative coping mechanisms. I didn't have a support system. And it sucked, and being alone sucks. But it is also the birthplace of greatness. If you spend too much time surrounded by other people and surrounded by other stimulus, you begin to be those stimuluses. You begin to be what you surround yourself with because it is normal. And because intrinsically as human beings, we want to fit in. We want to belong. And those who fit in try so hard to stand out. And those who stand out by no fault of their own will do anything to try to fit in, to be understood. Next, you want to try new things. Now, trying new things can be anything. Groupon is a great resource for trying new things. There's tons and tons of resources online to find like-minded people. And this doesn't have to be with other people. It could be as simple as going for a walk in the park, taking any one of these self-care resources that are available to you and running with it. And that's what I mean by trying new things. And it's not easy. So you need to keep an open mind and be patient. I put a little spoiler alert here because building positive coping mechanisms sucks. You won't see improvement for quite some time. And I read a book recently called Atomic Habits that speaks about a lot of interesting concepts. One of these interesting concepts is something called the plateau of latent potential, where because you go to the gym for 2 weeks and you don't see any results, you believe that there's no reason to go to the gym. I've been going for 2 weeks. Why the fuck am I going if I'm not seeing any results? You hit that plateau of latent potential and all of a sudden your new positive coping mechanism doesn't seem that worth it. So it's important to follow through and it's important to have patience and it's important to understand that your progress is subjective as an individual. Not to measure it up to how anybody else is doing, not to measure it up to what anybody else is doing, but for yourself. Because at the end of the day, you are the center of your own universe. All right, so we're gonna write down a little bit, flip to the next page. Again, be as honest with yourself as possible. Nothing about this is going to work unless you are honest. Everybody done? Yeah? Finishing up? Yeah, we'll take like 20 more seconds.
20 more seconds.
Do like 3.5. All right. So, does anybody want to share out some of their positive coping mechanisms? What's up?
Meditation, gratitude, work out, run.
Awesome. Anybody else?
Finding a solution.
Yeah, there you go. Cooking? Very nice. I heard dance too. Right? There you go. Painting? Awesome. Anybody else?
Talking to a friend.
Talking to a friend. There you go. So, positive coping mechanisms often feel very simple. You know, you could just say, oh, painting, journaling, but they're really so much more than that. Painting is not just painting, it's an expression of self on canvas, or whatever your medium is. Journaling isn't just journaling, it's truly being honest with yourself and exposing everything that it is in your life. And with negative coping mechanisms, they just aren't that deep. They're shallow solutions to problems that have immense depth in your personality. And that's why they require immense solutions to solve. AA, Drug Anonymous. They require entire 12-step programs to get over your negative coping mechanisms because they become that deeply ingrained in who you are as an individual. And the goal is to have positive coping mechanisms be that ingrained in who you are as an individual. So a lot of the stuff that you guys talk about, a lot of the coping mechanisms that I heard were similar to something else. Habits. So when I say habits, a lot of people might think that I mean, oh, you know, I have a habit of picking things up as soon as I drop them. Or I have a habit of knocking into my bed dresser the second I wake up in the morning. Or I have a habit of journaling. And the reason that we say these things is because 45% of everything that we do is habitual. That means 45% of your entire life is on autopilot. 45% of your entire life is based off of decisions and preconceived notions and biases of things that you have done before. Think about it. How many of you wake up the same way each morning? Or at least for the most part have something that you do every morning? I wake up, I brush my teeth, maybe light a clip, watch some YouTube videos, maybe get my day started. And that's one of the things that I want to fix. But I can't fix that if I'm not honest with myself about it in the first place. And that's because, for me, it's automatic. Something that I don't think about. And that's because of this. The habit trigger loop. And the way a habit trigger loop works is in 3 steps. First step, triggers. I'm not going to read this to you. I'm going to basically sum it up, put it in layman's terms. A trigger is essentially anything that reminds you of the habit. For example, if you smoke cigarettes, taking a deep breath can be enough to remind you of smoking a cigarette, and suddenly a trigger. And the next thing that follows is the behavior. And the behavior is the actual habit that takes place. It's the actual action of taking out your pack of cigarettes, taking a cigarette, putting it up to your mouth, lighting it. And finally, you get what you were looking for. Reward. Your brain rewards itself with a small release of dopamine or serotonin. And suddenly it feels like nothing else matters. Suddenly it feels like you have accomplished something because you have. You have completed the habit trigger loop. No matter how good or how bad, your brain recognizes that you have done something habitually. And it will give you that same response that you felt the first time you did it. So, when we talk about habits, and we talked about how much it sucks to build these positive coping mechanisms, I just want you to look at this chart. Let me draw it out for you. This is how good you can be in 1 year on a 1% increase. If you are 1% better every single day, if you make a decision every single day that is just 1% better, you will be 37% better by the end of the year. Versus being 1% worse. And notice how the 1% worse is not a strict decline, it plateaus. Because at a certain point, you may hit what you call rock bottom. You may hit that point where at the end of the day, you feel like there is no hope. But the fact of the matter is, and you may have heard it before, but rock bottom has no place to go but up. And it's totally fine that some people may need to hit rock bottom in order to recognize just how far they have to climb. But the truth is that rock bottoms will teach you lessons that mountaintops never can. And the rock bottom is where you truly learn about yourself and who you are and how to get out of it and what your coping mechanisms are and what habits you need to build. Success is about building systems, not about goals. How many people do you think in New York City want to be millionaires? Okay, all right. Actually, I'll change the question. I'll say multi-millionaires because it's New York City and, $1 million is like 20 a year. Everybody. So why is everybody not a millionaire? If everybody has the same goal, if everybody wants to accomplish the same thing, why is everybody not a multi-millionaire? Because of their systems, because of their habits, because of their mindsets. Because of that same idea that we had earlier where you can win the lottery and win $10 million, but you won't be somebody that knows how to invest. You won't be somebody that knows how to make money. You won't be somebody that you weren't before the $10 million. You'll just be the same person with $10 million and a lot more friends. A lot more. And building these systems involves not just saying, I want to journal. Not just saying, I want to meditate. It means planning out step by step. When you wake up in the morning, I want to take my meditation pillow out. I want to sit down. I want to put my headphones in. And I'm going to meditate for 15 minutes. If I can't do 15 minutes, I'll do 5. If I can't do 5, I'll do 3. That is the system of a habit. And that goes back to that feeling of fulfillment. Where even if you set the goal for 15 minutes, the progress comes from the 3, from the 5, from the system that you have built. The goal does not come from being a millionaire. The goal comes from establishing businesses, from investing, from saving. That is the system to become a millionaire. You don't become a painter. You paint. And then you become a painter. So it's all about the systems that you choose to build. So we're going to do an activity. We're going to do 2 activities at once because we are running a little short on time. You're just going to go to forming positive habits and breaking negative habits. You're going to write down some positive habits that you want to build, and you're going to write down some negative habits that you may want to break. And keep in mind this idea of systems. Don't just write down that you want to start meditating. Write down why you want to start meditating. Write down why it's important for you to meditate. And write down a step-by-step process of how you plan to start meditating. We're going to take 5 minutes, and then we will begin wrapping it up. All right, is everybody done? Sort of. All right. Yeah, we have a little bit more, and we're almost done, and then I have a couple of really awesome announcements. So we're going to continue this by one of my favorite quotes from, even though he was a bit of an ass, one of the people that I think has probably had the largest impact on the world, and it's going to be Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs said, technology is nothing. What's important is that you have a faith in people, that they're basically good and smart, and if you give them tools, they'll do wonderful things with them. So the fact that you're here, I'm going to operate on the understanding that you are both good and smart. So that's awesome. So If your phone is a tool, consequently, how you use that tool defines its worth and purpose. You can use a knife to kill fellow man, or you can use it to kill, hold on, I just completely messed up. You can use a knife to kill a beast and feed man, or you can use a knife to kill a man. You can use fire to burn down a village, or to cook that same meat. Unless you're vegan and vegetarian, and then it's just not a problem. But regardless of it, how you use tools defines their purpose and their functionality. And the iPhone and technology and cellular devices in general are probably one of the most underutilized and misutilized devices that we have today. Where now they have become social media black holes, where we jump from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, back to Twitter, back to Instagram, back to Facebook, and then finish it off with Snapchat. All while they don't have any new posts from the first time you open Instagram. We just hope that there's something new to see. But what if I told you that there was a whole plethora of apps and resources out there to help you accomplish your goals? Apps for everything on this list. You can't really see it, but mindfulness, meditation, all that stuff. We have apps for things like journaling. You can journal on your phone day to day. It can track your location, where you've been, photos you've taken. And it can catalog your entire life. I have personally been using this app for about 3 years now. Every single day I journal at the end of the day. It was very difficult. It took me about 1.5 years to build up that habit to the point where I knew I had to journal at the end of the day. You have apps for things like meditation. Blake over here has been meditating for how many hours now?
Over 4,000.
4,000 hours of meditation.
Wow.
Through Headspace, right? Headspace. And that's just an app on your phone. You could be on the train. You could be in a family event. If you don't like your family that much and you want to meditate a little bit, calm yourself down. Your phone can do that for you. And that's what the incredible part is there's so many applications, exercise applications. I hate the gym. They always want me to come in to cancel my membership. Why would I come in to cancel my membership? I don't want to go there anymore. So what I do now is I exercise at home with these apps. I have apps for calisthenics. I have apps for 7-minute workout. If I only have 7 minutes, I can get a whole workout in. I have apps for yoga, if that's your thing. There's so many apps out there that can help you achieve what you want. Finance apps. I'm shit with money. I'm horrible. So I use finance apps to track my finances, my income, how much spending I've been doing. Way too much. And I would only know that thanks to these apps. I'd only create budgets thanks to these apps. Productivity apps. Keeping track of your to-do list, keeping track of things you have to accomplish. Luann over here just told me that she has an issue of overthinking, thinking too much about things. It's because you have so much in your mind that has no outlet. Painting, journaling, to-do lists, anything to get what's in your mind out on paper somewhere so it's not occupying space, valuable space in your mind. Apps to help you sleep. There's apps that can help you track your sleep cycle. Apps that can help you fall asleep through rain sounds, binaural audio, things like that. We have apps for brain training. So these are super, super interesting because they're actually part of a lot of different studies related to Alzheimer's, related to degeneration of cognitive tissue. And it's been proven that playing mini games like this on the train, on the subway, 5 minutes out of your day can reduce your risk of developing neurodegenerative diseases. And that's in the palm of your hand. Last but not least, we have education apps. I didn't share much of my story with the education system, but I actually just graduated high school last November. Thank you very much. Thank you. And for me, it was an 8-year journey. I was in high school on and off for 8 years. And I didn't learn anything that I learned today in high school. Everything that I know today, everything that I have learned and will continue to learn is because of resources like this. Udemy, Coursera, Lynda, college level courses, college in-depth curriculum for at times as cheap as $10 to $50 on anything you want to learn. Videography, photography, coding, painting, anything.
They got like business courses.
Business courses. You can have a whole BMA course online. Yes.
You could get lynda.com for free given your public library.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's also part of LinkedIn Learning as well. If you work for a lot of different corporations, there's so many avenues to be able to access this sort of material. And the great thing about Coursera and what separates it is it gives you diplomas. The courses on Coursera are free, and you only pay $50 if you want a certification that you can put on your resume or pass along to future employers.
So you
That's
gotta be
invaluable.
certified, like
Absolutely.
I'm gonna have to call Lynda and Coursera.
Next, I don't want you to think that just because I'm talking about apps, I want you to spend your head all day in your phone. The point of using your phone as a tool for transformation is to spend less time on it. It's to spend intentional time on your device. It's to spend time on your device with purpose. You only pick up your device when you know that you're going to be journaling, when you know that you're going to be learning something. Maybe you want to check your social media real quick, but you do something else right after that, such as check something off a to-do list. It's being intentional with how you use your phone. Screen time is something that will let you know how much time you're spending on each app. I'm sure if a lot of you opened up your screen time and I saw how much Instagram you'd be using, I know I'd be upset about that. And that's okay, because Instagram is also an invaluable resource these days. Instagram has become LinkedIn for creatives, for personalities, for people like me. How many people on LinkedIn do you think would really understand what it is I'm trying to do here? I'll tell you, not a lot, because I tried. They don't get it. But Instagram brought a lot of you here today. So it's all about how you use the tools and resources that are available to you. Screen time can allow you to put limits on apps. If you only want to spend an hour a day on Instagram, screen time can do that for you. If you only want to be able to use phone calls or text messages between certain hours, screen time can do that for you. And so much more with every update. Next, we have night mode. Now, night mode is something that is invaluable when you're trying to go to sleep. How many of you guys know blue light radiation or of blue light radiation? Very good. So blue light radiation is essentially radiation that is emitted from every screen. Every single screen that does not have special tints on it emits blue light radiation. Blue light radiation over time can cause headaches, trouble falling asleep, and especially, watch out, and especially if you use your device before bedtime, it can be up to 60 times harder to fall asleep because your brain has been stimulated so much by that blue light radiation that even if your body is tired, your mind will still be wired. I'm a poet. And I didn't even know.
Hey, you did it again.
Bedtime. Bedtime is really, really awesome. It's a more advanced alarm clock for your device. It'll track when you stop using your phone so you can know how much sleep you're getting. It'll tell you when you have to wake up and on average how much time you're getting sleep. Basically a fancy alarm clock built into your device. Last but not least, we have make it monochrome. So a lot of the stimulus that we receive from our devices is based on the color, the vibrance of our devices. With make it monochrome, you can actually make your device completely black and white. So all the color and all the stimulus is removed. And that's been proven to make it less likely to pick up your device, simply because it just doesn't look as interesting as it did. So finally, I want to share a little bit about the way that your mind and body are connected. So we talked a lot about blue light radiation and having anxiety and having trouble falling asleep. How many people of you have heard the term trust your gut? Go with your gut. Anybody know where that comes from?
It's because your digestive system, which is like your small and large intestine, has like the most, like aside from your brain, it has the most like.
You want to come up here and do the lecture? She's absolutely right. So your brain, you actually have a second brain in your stomach.
Wow.
Your your stomach is a microbiome. And what was your name again? Sorry.
My name's Nadia.
Nadia. So like Nadia was saying, your brain is connected to your gut by your vagus nerve. And if that vagus nerve is separated, your stomach is the only organ that can act independently. It's the only organ that, if separated from your brain, will still be able to act fully functionally. That's
why like sometimes when like something happens, you get that pit in your stomach?
Absolutely. That's also connected to your reptilian brain. When you feel danger, you get a pit in your stomach. You get anxiety. When you get nervous, you get that pit there. That's all related to the microbiome in your gut. That's why things like probiotics are so important to balance out the healthy and unhealthy bacteria.
That's why
Next.
they say eat healthy.
Huh? Absolutely. And if you don't eat healthy, you can do supplements.
You got a shitty mother.
Next, we have vitamin D and melanin. So vitamin D deficiency has been shown to have a link to depression. And people who have darker skin have greater amounts of melanin, and melanin reduces vitamin D production in the skin, which consequently means that if you have melanin in your skin, you have a predisposition for depression. Yeah. So it's actually encouraged that you take vitamin D supplements. So avoid that. And lastly, it's a really, really obvious one, but the balance that exercise and anxiety have is incalculable. When you exercise your body, you also exercise your mind. When your body is physically tired, but your mind is not, it's a really uncomfortable feeling. Some of you may know it as tossing and turning in your bed while you're asleep. Some of you may know it as sweaty palms and headaches. Some of you may know it as a stomach ache or a cramp. But your entire body is constantly wired. It's constantly waiting for that next stimulus. It's constantly waiting for that next input. And when you exercise, you teach your body to calm down. You burn through energy, excess energy that is not required, that only makes you feel anxious. So last but not least, we're going to flip to the last page and we're going to do, the next page, and we're going to do a find your why exercise. So real quick, just write down why you're here. Write down why you want to cultivate mental health. Write down why you want to have a one-person wellness mind state. And then after that, I'm going to finish off with a really, really exciting announcement. Alrighty. So we're coming to the end of the seminar now, and it's really, really important for me to thank the people here at Holy Rad. And they're right behind you right there. It's that group of lovely ladies over there. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot, I don't know if they know this because I haven't told them this, but Do It Different as it exists today wouldn't really be possible. Is that my device?
Is it timer?
Yeah, no, someone was trying to ping my phone. Anyways, Do It Different wouldn't really exist in the way that it exists today. Like the day that I came up to you guys and said that I wanted to do a mental health seminar, it didn't exist yet. And only up until that it really became something serious, it took its shape today. And the platform and the resources that you guys have provided me with, it's just invaluable, you know, and it's something that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. And I really mean that. So thank you for inviting me. All right, so last but not least, I have spent the past 3 or 4 weeks building something really, really awesome. The Do It Different website has been revamped. We have a new blog with tons and tons of posts up there already. We have a really, really awesome new blog segment called Me, My Self-Care, and I, which is all about interviewing different people from all walks of life so they can share their self-care journey. They can share how they do self-care, what it means to them. And just in general, we understand at Do It Different that self-care and mental health is never going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. In fact, we gain strength from that diversity of thought and from that understanding that nobody is going to experience life the same way. However, by sharing and providing each other resources, we will all become stronger. And that's why I created this. This is a giant resource for all of you to use. It is something that will eventually become paid part of a membership in order to support our other classes. But to you, it will always be free. This is a giant resource with 8 main categories, 2 of them coming soon. We have self-improvement, exercise, nutrition, productivity, parenting, finance, nutrition, and then an other section. And each one of these categories has apps, blogs, websites, YouTube channels, books that you can use, and we are adding more and more on a daily basis. If you turn to the second to last page on your booklet, I believe second to last page, right? Yeah. You have a QR code. You can open up the camera app on your phone, and you can scan that code. You'll get a little banner at the top of your screen, open it up, and you can go right into our resource catalog. Take some time, explore it, look through it, find all these different methods of self-care that are available to you now. Check in once in a while and sign up with our newsletter, and we'll be able to update you when we add new resources. If you have a resource that you'd like to submit, we have a section at the bottom where you can submit a resource. Maybe it's something we haven't heard of yet, and we welcome it with open arms. So with all of that and everything that we discussed today, I really just want you all to leave with the understanding that you have power. That you are never, ever, ever powerless to anything that you might face in life, except taxes. Sorry. Yeah, shout out Mike the Situation. No. Basically, you're never powerless to deal with the things that come your way. The only thing it takes to deal with those things is patience, understanding, both empathy and sympathy for yourself, and the resources. And that's what Do It Different is really all about, building that community out for you guys. And I thank each and every one of you for coming here. Thank you.